Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is an author and life coach, Mr. Eric G. How you doing today, Eric?
I'm doing great, Ryan. How about yourself?
Yeah, be a lot nicer when it gets a little bit warmer outside.
Yeah, give it like 3 months, 4 months, depending on where you are. I'm in California, so I try not to complain that much because it's not that bad for us, but it's still pretty chilly.
What's the temperature there today?
Well, then now you're gonna, because I know you're in a colder location, so you're gonna think I'm a wimp, but it's like, low 60s.
Yeah, I'll take that all day long.
Yeah, but at least you get the seasons. We don't really get the seasons out here, so that's complaining about it. But but it is still getting kind of cold for me.
Yeah. So the number one question the audience is probably wondering, who is Eric G?
Well, there's a great intro. I'm an author and a life coach, but really I'm more just someone who enjoys learning about people and helping people learn about themselves as well, and kind of go through the same struggle, especially when people are going through the same struggles that I went through, especially at a younger age. And I've been able to study, research, do a lot of practical application with this fun personality typing methodology that I developed. And so that's kind of what I do now, is coach people through that and kind of help people discover who they really are versus who people tell them they should be, which I think is a problem.
Yeah, you touch on that like right there a little bit. How many people believe what somebody else tells them about who they should be?
Yeah, it depends. Obviously I work with personality types and like identifying different ones, and it really does depend on your personality type. I think some personality types are more plentiful. So when they hear stuff like this is who they should be, it actually kind of matches. So they're like, oh, this is perfect. I mean, of course, the weakness is, if you've never really thought about what you truly wanted, and then you become 40 and you're like, wait a minute, I just kind of did what everyone said because it worked for me. And now I'm like, I'm not really happy. And then there's some personality types that are really susceptible to changing who they are, because they see whatever on TikTok, or just like their parents tell them that they should be a doctor, and they're like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor and that's what I should want to do. And then there are others that are just like, no, I don't care what you think. I'm going to do what I do. And that sounds great at face value. But then there's a lot of struggle with them because oftentimes they grow up lonely and maybe people kind of hate them. So, I mean, we all have problems, right? So it's really just about how to figure out the best way to accept other people who are different than us, but also accept that our differences can be like make us who we are.
Yeah. How many people do you run across that were kind of told to follow this career path or this way in life and reach that age and like miserable and like, now what?
Yeah, a lot of my clients, it's funny. I get clients who are in like junior high, so 10 or 11, and it's when parents just don't know what to do with their kids anymore because their kid's not listening to them, right? And they're like, I don't know what to do with this kid. They used to listen to me, and now they're this like hormonal punk. But then I also have a lot of clients who are like in their 40s, right? And they're like trying to pivot, and they don't know exactly. The problem is they often think in pivoting in terms of like practicality and logistics, like what can I actually do and what can I move into versus what do you truly want? Like, why are you unhappy with where you are to begin with? And then figuring out, okay, because I'm unhappy because I'm not really getting what I want, figuring out what I want will help me pivot because it'll help me make a better decision on where to pivot to. I'd say it's like my clients are probably mixed between the former and the latter. So I do get a lot of people, to answer your question in a long way, who are just like, man, my life sucks. Like, how do I change it? What do I do?
Yeah. So you wrote the book, The Power of Personality. What makes that subject so interesting to you?
I mean, it goes back to my own struggles growing up and thinking I was a weirdo. And I was like, what the heck? Like, why do I want things that are different than the things that my classmates seem to want? And I think with my personality type, it was definitely more of like, there's something wrong with me. Other personality types might be like, oh, there's something wrong with everybody else. But either way, like, I just think nothing is a greater feeling than when you are helping a kid realize like they're not a weirdo, they're not an alien, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just they're a little different, and it's okay to be that way because in our society we need all different types of personalities, not just the most common ones. And it's also like helping people who are, I guess, quote unquote, the more common personalities. I hate using that word common because it sounds like basic, but really it's helping them realize, no, it's okay to be that way. And their key is to accept other people because those different people provide something.
Yeah. What differentiates your book from other personality books?
I would say like the methodology in terms of how to, I don't want to say categorize, but essentially like determine what someone's personality is. I also use animal personality types, and that's just fun. People love like, oh, I'm a fox, I'm a shark. It's very easy to remember. People remember what their animal is. But the biggest thing is I break it down to what we value, and not necessarily in a superficial way. Like I think sometimes people might be like, oh, we value organization. And I'm like, organization and structure isn't a value. That's just like a method of operation, right? Our MOs are based on our values though. So because we value this, our method tends to be this. So really the value is safety and security. Certain personality types, about half the population, want to feel safe and secure. So that's their core value. So thus they are going to want more structure because it makes them feel safe and secure. And I think once we accept that different people have different core values, I think that's what separates my book, because I think the easiest way for people to accept differences are very superficial ones. But my book stresses that those superficial differences don't make us who we are. It's the big ones. And we have to just generally accept that people have bigger differences than sometimes we're willing to accept.
Yeah. Also seen them like with birds is the ones that I've met somebody who does like personality tests with kind of birds and everything. So what kind of animals do you kind of use?
So yeah, I mean, are there, trying to think, there is a bird, there's an owl, you can be an owl type. I think that's probably the only bird specific, but there's different ones, and a lot of them are symbolic, right? I do think that a fox, if you tell someone, oh, you're a fox, I think we are ingrained to know what that means, kind of sneaky, at their worst, a little shady, but kind of a trickster. That is like the fox personality type versus maybe a shark personality type, which is at their worst, particularly narrow-minded, but at their best, extremely focused and like a killer through and through. And I tend to use a lot of pop culture references in my book because, people know that. Like if I say, oh, a shark is like Michael Jordan, people know who Michael Jordan is. They know why he's good at what he does. And they also know some of the flaws and, maybe why he wasn't the best basketball owner versus being a great basketball player. So I think I tend to use animals that people can easily relate to and understand, like, okay, this is who I am.
How many different personality types are there?
I use 16, and I think that's going to be a very familiar number to a lot of people who read a lot of these books. Anyone who knows Myers-Briggs or MBTI, they use 16 as well. That's why, as I mentioned before, the biggest difference with my book is how you get there, right? Like Myers-Briggs, they use a lot of like, are you introverted? Are you extroverted? And for me, I'm like, that's all superficial stuff. As I mentioned before, it's based on our values. And so I break people down to 4 different packs, and each pack has a different core value. And then within those 4 packs, there are 4 animal types that kind of attain that value maybe differently than another personality type within their pack. So in a way, you're going to find people who are similar to you, and yet you go about the world maybe in a slightly different fashion.
Yeah. So can you fall in like different groups?
Do you mean like, oh, I'm in this group in this moment, and then I'm in this group in this moment?
Like you can change like depending on stress level and kind of like maybe if you're in a leadership position, you got to kind of change.
I'm a big believer that people don't change, but we can act differently, right? Our behavior can change. But I like how you said that stress level goes up. I do think that's probably the best way to figure out what someone really is when their stress level is high. I think we revert back to what makes us comfortable, right? Our wheelhouse, like who we truly are. It's kind of like a basketball player. Like you could have a basketball player who has like all different kinds of moves in their bag, right? But, when the game is on the line and they got the toughest defense on them, they're going to go to their wheelhouse, right? They're going to go to like what they know best and what they feel most comfortable with. And I think the same is true with personality types. I think we can act in a different way, but I try not to say like, oh, depending on the context, because like in a leadership context, I think we can all lead differently based on our personality type versus that idea of that a leader has to be strong, confident, bossy is the negative term, and just like tell people what to do, right? And they're like, no, some people just don't lead that way. And that's a good thing. Sometimes you need leaders who are more open to hearing the contributions of their followers and building off of that. So that was a long way of saying, I don't think we can be different types, but I think we can borrow from the different skill sets of different personality types when we need to. But I always emphasize like figure out who you are first, because I don't want anyone trying to change who they are by borrowing from other types, right?
Yeah. So can someone's personality type change over time?
I always like to say we don't change, we grow, and we grow into either a better version of ourselves or a worse version of ourselves, right? And I think sometimes the time when people say, "Oh no, everyone can change," in my experience, what I found is that person who's saying everybody can change is really just saying everybody can change into what I think is best for them, you know? And I think that's what's dangerous, right? I do think when people truly feel like they've changed, I think that they actually didn't know what they were before. Like maybe their parents told them they were a certain thing and they grew up believing it. And then through the course of their life, they started realizing they weren't that, they are something else. And I do think that is, I wouldn't say a genuine change. I guess our perspective or our self perspective has changed. And I think that's a totally healthy thing. So at the end of the day, I think we have these core values and hopefully we can connect to them at an early age. But if not, it's never too late. And I do think that change is good.
Yeah. What do you think the factors are that lead most people to want to grow out of that one personality type?
Out of their like change who they are, or
Yeah.
like, lots of different things. You know, as I mentioned before, there is one personality pack that values safety and security, and they make about half the population. So if you're in that pack, everything you hear, especially in school, is going to validate who you are. So really, those people aren't going to change and want to change much because they're like, oh, I follow the rules. I like things set and structured. I do my homework and I do things in a steady fashion. And that's what I'm told. My teachers say I'm great. My parents say I'm great. I am great. And I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. So that pack doesn't have to worry too much about being influenced by other people as much as the more minority packs. I think those are susceptible to maybe being told, oh, like, you need to follow the rules more, or you need to be more structured. You need to like write everything down in an organizer, you know, at school. I think those factors at an early age make people want to be something else. And then nowadays with social media, then there's all the stuff that people like view on Instagram or TikTok, and like, oh, I should be feeling like this, or this is what's going to make me a great person. And of course, there's a danger to that as well.
Yeah. What personality type are you?
So my pack, I call them the shamans, and we value self-knowledge. So it makes sense, right? For what I chose to do is, and I had mentioned before, I love learning about people and I love teaching people about people, and also learning about myself, I guess. And that's where the self-knowledge comes into play. So I'm part of the personality pack that's a shaman. And then within that pack, I'm not the most flattering animal. I'm a baboon. People like to complain about their animals, and I'm just like, hey, my animal is not great. Like, I know everybody wants to be a fox, you know, or a shark. You know, I keep mentioning those because those sound cool. But yeah, I'm a baboon, and I really just, the difference with a baboon versus some of the other animal personality types within the shaman pack are that baboon's a little bit more aggressive. They're a little more in an advocating position, and they're like the voice of what they believe versus other types that are a little bit more organized and structured and work within a group setting. So,
yeah. Why do you think some common pop psychology ideas like birth order, type A personalities, and extra invert are overblown?
oh, I love to take shots at birth order and extrovert introvert. Birth order is the really easy one for me to explain, and it gets kind of wonky, but I do explain in the book. You know, as I had mentioned, I call them gatherers. So one of the personality packs that value safety and security are called gatherers. They make about half the population. So really, when we look at people and we make observations about humans, like it's so easy to just say, oh, people are like this type because we see them about half the time. And so I think in terms of birth order, if you have a gatherer child who's the oldest child, they will fit the mold of what we think an older child should act like, right? Like responsible, they'll be the second parent or third parent, you know, to the kid, their siblings. They'll be, you know, make sure they're conscientious of everything. But that only works if you have a gatherer as the oldest child. Now that does happen half the time. So I think it makes sense that people are like, oh yeah, this is typical because I see it half the time that, you know, the oldest child is like that. But coming from a sibling pack where, you know, my older sister is not a gatherer, I can tell you the oldest child is not necessarily the most structured and conscientious about their, you know, other siblings. That I can say for a fact. So birth order tends to work only, and same with introversion, extroversion, that works too because it fits kind of the gatherer mold. Like I think when people are more outgoing, they see that, right? Like they're like, oh, this person's more talkative, this person's more shy. Very easy to see. But when you really get into the depths of personality, you start realizing like, no, like different people can be extroverted in certain situations and introverted in certain situations, right? It just depends on how much we value that particular situation, right? And what we're doing. So, and that was a long way of me saying, like, I think those are very superficial ways to read things. And unfortunately, there's a lot of books on introversion and stuff that people buy into. And I just think it's such a interpretation that lacks nuance.
Yeah. Do you think it can also typecast people to a certain thinking that you are this when you're actually not?
Oh yeah, like people like, and then you are shocked, right? We're like, oh my god, this person's always so shy, and then man, they're acting so different. They're so like outgoing now. I'm like, maybe they aren't acting like maybe they haven't changed. They're just acting different based on the situation. And I always say, like, certain personalities might be the type that, like my type, for example, the baboon. We might be the type that would go up in front of people and have a TED talk, maybe about personality theory, right? But which makes us seem fairly outgoing, but we're going to be the last person to go stand on top of a bar in Cabo and start doing body shots. Like that's a different kind of outgoing. I guess we wouldn't be the last type to do that, but that would not be our first choice. So I think it just depends on what people value, right? Like if you value something highly, you're probably going to be a lot more aggressive and outgoing and forceful when you're in that situation. If you don't really care about something and you don't really value it highly, you're going to be a lot more passive and quiet and shy. And it doesn't mean that you're weak. It just means that you just don't care about that as much as maybe other people do.
Yeah. How can knowing your personality type help with your career?
Oh, that's one question I get asked a lot, like, and I'm not going to say that no one can do, or certain types have to do certain careers, but I will say that within a career, like let's say like the medical field, even within that field, you'll find different personality types, kind of going towards different fields within that field, right? Like if, let's say you're a shark, as I mentioned before, sharks are very narrow of focus, and very like great with tools. So they're not always the best students. So, but if they do become a doctor, they're probably not going to be that doctor that's super structured that you're going to see every day and is going to make sure like they know every single one of their patients. But because they're so narrow of focus and so good with tools, they're going to be the best surgeons, right? So I think when you find out what your personality type is, not only will you find out what you value, so it can kind of push you towards certain fields, but even when you're in that field, you can kind of go, okay, now that I'm a doctor, let's say, or now that I'm a writer, what am I going to write about? Do I have to write about this? No, because I don't have to write about what Hemingway writes about, because I'm different than Hemingway. I'm not into bullfighting and deep sea fishing. I'm more into like what's going on in the inside. So maybe I can write a little like Tolstoy. So like knowing your personality type can also help you figure out where you fit in the world and what I wouldn't say naturally going to be good at, but what you're naturally going to like. And I think that's another mistake we make with personality type. Everyone wants to go, okay, this is my personality type. What am I good at? And I'm always like, you are not automatically good at anything, but you're automatically going to like things more than other things. And I think the more that we like something, the more that we'll practice it and do it quite a bit. And obviously, the more we practice it, the better we get.
So it kind of shows you kind of where you're a better fit.
Yeah. And better fit in terms of what you like, right? Versus what people tell you should like. I think and I really think it's really cool when you see it within specific fields, like where it's like, oh, okay, this person is this role within like if you have like a software engineering team, oh, this person's specialty is this versus this person's specialty is this. Like both work, like it's like being on a basketball team. Everyone plays basketball, but everyone's going to have different specialties and skill sets, and which is great because you need those differences to like make a good winning team. And if you have too much redundancy, then maybe you got to like switch pieces, right? Like as opposed to trying to make people do a job and a role that they're not suited for.
Yeah. How's your work with like businesses and showing them their personality types help these businesses grow and like build teamwork?
Yeah, like I can speak for a specific example. I had a friend who was a product manager at Hulu, and I would help her teams because, and once I don't want to like paint a wide brush, but like software engineers are the personality type that are not always great with people.
Yeah.
They don't really want to like, I mean, they're like, okay, this person's an idiot. I don't want to talk to them, and then they can be very insular and just kind of do their coding. Well, now we have AI to do coding, but they can do whatever they do in their own individual space, work from home. And so my friend who was the product manager, her job was like, no, I got to get everybody in line. Like I'm the person who's communicating with every single one of these people to make sure that we reach our objective. And I think in talking with the members of her team and letting them know, okay, like you have this personality type, this is the way you are, but this person has a different personality type. So when you communicate, there might be some conflict. It's not on purpose, it's not intentional, there's no like animosity with it, but there's going to be conflict because you guys aren't communicating in the same way due to your differences. And so I think that helped them just work, it increased the morale and the teamwork and just help people, I guess, work together.
Yeah. Does it help leaders kind of know too what their type is? So how to kind of communicate with their employees who are a different type?
Yeah, 100%. Like it helps you figure out, okay, this is what's going to motivate that person too, right? Like, I used to work a lot of this with my teachers when I owned an education company for about a decade. And this was one of the methodology that I taught my teachers to use with their students because they would be in a one-on-one setting. And obviously in a one-on-one setting, it's great because it's really easy to communicate with your student. The danger, of course, is that it's also very easy to push your values on your student, right? And their motivation might be totally different. And the tutors and my teachers that understood this the best were, funny enough, the parents. Because I think once a parent learns about personality typing, then they start realizing, oh, I mean, the first thing they say is like, oh, I love my kids equally, but yeah, my son pisses me off sometimes and I like my daughter better, right? Or vice versa. And I think that's the way of saying, okay, like I can love them equally, but this is the reason why, because we just have different personalities and that's okay. I always say the parent who has like the gather parent who like doesn't want their kid to eat the cookies in the cookie jar. I always use this as an example. The gather parent who doesn't want to eat their kid or doesn't want their kids to eat the cookies in the cookie jar will just tell them, hey, if you eat that cookie, I'm going to slap you in the hand. Now, if you get a hunter child, hunters value excitement. They don't value safety and security. They're more like, no, I want visceral excitement and I'm willing to get it. The hunter child will just think, is that cookie worth the slap? That's what they're thinking. They're not thinking, oh, like I should listen to the authority. They're just like, okay, maybe the slap is worth the cookie. And if it is, they'll take the cookie and then take the slap as well. But if you have a gather parent, like, no, that's not what I mean. I mean, don't eat the cookie. I'm the authority. I'm your parent. Just listen to me. So that's a long example, but that's kind of like one of the examples I always use.
How can knowing your personality type help in romantic relationships?
Oh, the funny thing is that's the question I always get asked too, is like, oh, who should I be hooking up with? I always put the disclaimer, you can be in a relationship with anyone, obviously, because I get that question a lot from people who are in relationships. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to be the justification of why you break up, or I don't want like you to use this theory to like say, okay, that's why I'm going to leave you. I think we can all be in a relationship with any personality type, but I will say that the conflicts that we have, why we like someone and why we don't get along with them, will be pretty consistent based on your personality type versus this personality type, right? So that will be consistent, and that will be consistent. So my thing is like, it's okay, you can be with anyone, just you're going to have to accept that as a given and not try to change them too much. Like, and knowing personality types can help us understand our partners better. So at least we can go like, okay, I understand why they're a little insensitive and I'm a more sensitive person and I kind of like want more compassion, but they're not going to give it. And that's just not who they are. And I have to realize that versus trying to get them to be more compassionate, because that's going to change them. And I don't think that's good for anyone.
Yeah. How can they start recognizing, like say someone was looking for like a relationship with somebody, how could they use it to kind of choose wisely?
Well, it depends on the personality type, right? Like the interesting thing here is personality types, I think we naturally go to our opposite, right? And I know that's cliche, opposites attract, but like I had mentioned, two packs, the gatherers and the hunters. Easy to remember, right? Because we think hunter-gatherer, right? Gatherers value safety and security. Hunters value excitement. Those seem like very competing values that would conflict, right? And they make up about 85% of the population. Gatherers, as I had mentioned earlier, make up about half the population. Hunters make up about a third. So that's about 85%. But when you look at couples, that is the most common coupling, is a gatherer-hunter coupling. So if you are one of those, at least it explains why you're fascinated with the other type, because they both communicate at the same level, and yet they have very strong differences. And I think we naturally look for people who are different than us that are not going to be redundant, right? Because when you think about it, you think that a gatherer-gatherer coupling would be the most common because they make up about half the population. and gathers like safety and security, and a relationship makes you feel more safe and secure. But what I found is that opposites really do attract on those lines. So as long as you can communicate in the same level, then you're going to be more attracted to your opposite.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think too, because that other person has something that you don't have that will help you guys succeed in different areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the funny thing is, we get attracted to our opposites, and then you get in a relationship with them, and then you try to make them more like you.
Yeah.
That's a no-no, right? And then they become like you, and then you wonder, wait, I don't really like them that much anymore, right? So that is don't try to change them, because you're going to take away all the attractiveness, what you were initially attracted to them, or the reason you were attracted to them to begin with.
Yeah. How can someone start recognizing other people's personality types?
Well, shameless plug. You can read my book, buy the book and read the book. It's actually right over my shoulder here. I only mention that because there is a specific kind of methodology that I break down in the book in a fun way, and that's how we can start recognizing things. My belief is that we met so many people, like all of us, unless you're a hermit, you met like thousands of people in your life, right? And you have all this memory stored in your head, but there's no methodology to kind of organize all this information, right? So hopefully my book helps people do that, to where you're going to start, when you read it, you're start going, okay, because there's a structure here, then I can start going, oh, no wonder why my dad was like that, or no wonder why my mom always said that, or no wonder why my mom and dad got along in this way and conflicted in this way. I think that's the beauty of it, is that learning about personality types isn't totally reinventing the wheel. You're not totally learning about something new. You're using information and intuition that already exists within each of us. It's really more tapping into that. And I think when you start understanding that methodology, then you'll start being able to like read people better. Whether it's like someone really close to you that you know really well, or someone you just met on the street.
Yeah. Can you type me for fun?
Oh, okay. I'd have to ask a couple questions, but like, when I was talking about that, what appealed to you? Like, do you seem like this? You don't seem like the safe and secure type of person. You're not like, oh, I want, safety and security. No. Did you play a lot of sports growing up, or watch a lot of sports growing up?
Yes.
What's your favorite sport?
Wrestling.
Wrestling. Interesting. And you like wrestling?
Yeah, I competed in wrestling. Not the big time professional wrestling, but like amateur wrestling.
Right. And not WWF or WWE.
No, that's what I'm saying. Not that.
Yeah. It also shows how old I am, is when I still refer to it as WWF. I'm like, WWF? And they're like, what? You mean the Wildlife Fund? I'm like,
that's what it used to be.
Yeah, I know. I'm talking like Hulk Hogan and, like Ultimate Warrior and stuff, Andre the Giant. So I would probably guess you sound a little like a hunter. You seem like a hunter type. Like, do you value excitement? Like, is that something? And I don't mean like adrenaline rush all the time and like race car driving, but just like that idea that hunters want to experience everything new. They want to like see everything that the world has to offer, smell everything, taste everything, hear everything. That's kind of their MO. Does that sound a bit like what drives you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be my read, is I think you're a hunter within that type. I don't know. But if you wrestled, I mean, that sounds like a shark. Sharks would be very good wrestlers. They have a very, like I mentioned, a narrow focus. So like, they're going to be like, no, I'm a killer. I'm going to, not necessarily all the time, but in this moment, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to take you down and do whatever I can. And they're very technique oriented. So, and I know not that I know that much about wrestling, but I do know that there's probably a lot of technique involved. You're not just like grabbing people and just trying to fling them, right? Like, you're using your leverage and things of that nature. So yeah, I would say a shark would be my guess, but I could be wrong. But Pete, you're always welcome to take the test online. I do have a test online, though I always put the disclaimer that, the test is cookie cutter, right? It's not like it's for everybody. Whereas, I mean, when people read the book, then that's when they really can tell, like, oh, okay, like this one really calls out to me. This is who I am.
Is it kind of like, I don't know if you ever heard of the DISC method?
It's a little, sorry, I got like a mosquito flying around me. I've heard of the DISC method. It's a little like that. Just the methodology and what I'm observing is different. The DISC tends to be more, just like most tests, they tend to be what you can observe, which makes total sense. I get it. Like, what we can observe is factual. Like, we see this person hitting a rock. So that's, what are they doing? They're hitting a rock. My methodology is more like, okay, it is important what they're doing, but what's more important is why we do it. Because everybody can be a writer, but not everybody writes for the same reason. Everyone can eat food, but not everyone eats food for the same reason. And I think the reason why we do the things we do is what makes us and determines who we are.
Yeah, so it's looking more at the whys,
Right.
You're looking more at the why you do this and why, like, kind of, like you said, your core values and like your why, your purpose.
Yeah. And the problem is I think most people assume that everybody's why is the same as theirs. And
No.
that is a problem, right? And it's so common. People are like, oh, well, family always comes first. Like you hear that all the time. People say family always comes first. I'm like, and I always say it didn't come first for Einstein, And when is the last time you heard of Einstein's family? And he had a daughter, but that wasn't his first priority. And is that a terrible thing? No, it doesn't make him a terrible human being because the knowledge that he imparted on the world has helped millions of families, right? So it's like everyone has their thing and their value, and it doesn't have to be the same. And we shouldn't judge people if they have a different value than we do.
Yeah. Could you type a well-known person for us that we'd probably all know?
Yeah. You give me one. Give me one, and I'll just do it for fun, like off the cuff.
We'll go Einstein since you said him.
Okay, yeah, because I'm glad because everyone always says Taylor Swift. I'm like, gosh, I'm so tired of typing Taylor Swift, and she's actually pretty easy to type because she's a hunter because she's a performer. Einstein is mentioning birds. Einstein would be the example of an owl. So owl types. I didn't mention this particular pack, but they come from the Smith personality pack. It's actually the only pack that I didn't mention. I mentioned gatherers who seek safety and security, hunters seek excitement, shamans seek self-knowledge, and the Smiths seek information. I used to say they seek knowledge, and then everybody's like, I'm a Smith. Everyone raised their hand. I'm like, no, okay, I got to stop using the word knowledge because that's too sexy of a word, strangely enough. And so I started using information. So then people kind of choose it less. So Einstein would be a Smith. Information is key for him, right? Like he just wants to know everything about the world, right? Every little detail. And within the Smith category, owls tend to be more reclusive. They tend to be the most in their head. They're the biggest daydreamers. And so they might not even know what's going on in their physical space at all times. Like everyone always tells stories about Einstein coming to lectures like with the wrong socks, or the mismatched socks, or maybe not wearing socks at all because he wasn't even paying attention. And people think that's like an exaggeration. Trust me, I know a bunch of owl personality types, and yeah, they sometimes don't know what the heck is going on, at least in their outer space, right? Inside, they're thinking about stuff, but outside, they're like, "Oh, what time is it? Oh, dang it, 5 hours passed already. I thought I was only here for 10 minutes." So Einstein would be a perfect example of an owl.
That's kind of interesting, right there.
Yeah, they're really cool. Owls they're like what's a good owl too is Bruce Banner, the guy who turns into the Incredible Hulk. Like owls tend to be that, I don't want to say the nerd. It's I hate using that stereotype, but they do kind of be like, there are that like nerdy stereotype that gets in the lab and is really thoughtful and research oriented, but might not necessarily be the best with people and actually acting in a physical space.
Yeah. This method has been featured on TV. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a kind of long story. The funny thing is my background is in screenwriting. And, after I sold my education company, I decided to go back to screenwriting and trying to write scripts and pilots and stuff. And I joined a writer's community and I made a lot of great friends there. And after we'd write, we'd go to this bar, just, to drink, obviously not to write anymore, and just to talk, because that's what writers like to do is drink and talk. And the personality typing came up as a conversation topic. And people really loved it, right? Because as I said, writers like to drink and they like to talk, and specifically talk about themselves. So they're like, oh my gosh, what animal am I? Oh, tell me about this animal. Tell me who I am, And so people started really getting into it and started asking different people what their animal type was. So a friend of mine was like, hey, you should write a book on this. And I was like, no, I want to keep writing my TV shows and trying to get stuff sold. And then she put it in the show that she was writing on, which was Apple TV's Mythic Quest. If anyone's seen that, just watch season 2. There's an episode where it's what we call a bottle episode. Everyone is kind of in one location. They're stuck in a room and they're all doing a personality test to figure out what animal they are, because it's like one of those work-based ones, right? Disc does that a lot. A lot of companies use Disc in that fashion.
Yeah.
So they're doing their version, which was really my version, right? It was featured in that episode. Now, she did change the animal types to make it funny. So like someone got like a mouse or something. Like I don't have a mouse personality type in my methodology. So yeah, it was featured in Mythic Quest with those ideas. And then once she did that, then I was like, you know what? If people liked it that much in the writer's room and people love the ideas, I'm going to write a book on it. And that's where the book came out or that's where that came about, was that I did that. And I was lucky enough to, get an agent and a publisher, and the book was published last year. So
Cool. Are you still working on pilots and screenplays and all that?
yeah, I'm kind of like going back into that world as well, because I'm a baboon and baboons like to do different things. Like we are not like, I don't want to say focused. We can be focused, but unfortunately we're not always the most focused. So our key is like understanding that. And that's an important thing too. Like if you know what your type is and you know what your weaknesses are, you can work on that. And I've worked my whole life on trying to follow through on at least half of the things that I start. So yeah, I've gone back to the screenwriting and just like trying, like whole hog, trying to get into that and write my scripts and maybe make something fictional versus my nonfiction book.
Yeah. So what are some of your short-term and long-term goals?
Short term, in terms of personality, is I'd love to start a podcast, because my follow-up book is going to be like related to one of the questions you answered or asked, which was about relationships. That's a very common question I get asked. It's a very common topic that people love to talk about when it deals with personality typing. But my book doesn't necessarily focus on that, because my book is very general, trying to teach people how to read people. But now, once you have read someone correctly, now I want to figure out like what's good. Like I don't say a good match, but if you're this type and you're this type, I want to go more in depth and okay, these are some of the problems you're going to have, and these are some of the great things you're going to have. So I'd love to start a podcast at first, because once again, relationship counseling is not my professional background. I mean, I know it in an amateur style kind of way, but so I'd love to do a podcast where I interview people and say, hey, you're like a dolphin personality type. How do you view relationships in this way? What are you looking for? What are you not looking for? What's attractive to you? What's unattractive to you? Because of course I'm going to get different answers based on people's personality types, and that'll be a good way to start my second book.
Yeah, and it'll give you a lot of ways to do the research.
Yes, in a very fun way, right? I mean, like, because at the end of the day, like reading a book on stuff, like what is that going to totally give you, and as opposed to like actually talking to real people? Because at the end of the day, when you're dealing with personality type theory, at the end of the day, theory is just a theory. You got to like put into practice, apply it, and see the patterns of behavior that you see. And that's the most important thing for me.
Yeah. How can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on, I'm not big on social media, but I do have social media. You can go on Instagram, find me at The Power of Personality. It's literally the book title. But you can also, if you want to take the test, that's probably what people would love to, well, I don't know, they'd love to do it, but people would be most interested in. You can go to utopiaproject.com, and that's YOU, like YouTube, utopiaproject.com, and you can find, it's called the Utopia 16 assessment, and you can take the test there. You can also find me on projectutopia.com, and then people are like, why do you have two tests or two sites? And I'm like, well, one site is better for setting up the test, one site is better for my life coaching. So that's where you can find me on either those two sites or my Instagram.
Okay. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
No, like I think the one thing that I briefly mentioned, and that's the one thing I always say as a tip, is find your anchor first, because once you find your anchor, then you can start borrowing from other personality types. But until you do, you're always going to be in danger of people forcing you to become something that you're not.
Yeah. All right. Final question. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
Ooh, in terms of adversity, I would say the adversity that I often deal with is finding confidence in yourself and who you are and who you truly are. I think that's probably one of the more important ones that I find that I have to deal with or work with. And I always just give the advice that my dad told me when I was 14. Did I listen to it when I was 14? No, I was that insecure kid who was wearing baggy jeans and polo shirts. My jeans were like size 40, even though I was probably like a size 27, but apparently that's in again. So I don't know. I used to think that was really ugly back then, but whatever, sag the jeans. My dad told me, he's like, you know what? At the end of the day, no one gives a shit. So you got to do what you do, and I didn't really listen to it back then. Of course, I wanted to be like everyone else. And I'd be like, oh no, you don't understand. This is cool. Looking back on it, it wasn't, but we're all like that, at a certain age. But I think that's the biggest tip I can give is like, in terms of beating adversity, or at least overcoming that, is at the end of the day, we are only the main character of our story. We are not the main character of anyone else's story. So you really shouldn't care what they think about you. Just got to do what works best for you. As long as you're not hurting anyone, it's totally fine, because at the end of the day, you might think this person really cares about what you're doing, but they're never going to care more about that than their own story. You might be as important supporting actor, you might just be a cameo in their story. So just worry about yourself.
Great advice. Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your insight into personality with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ryan. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is go through the fire.